Right, so the last two videos on Skaven have done really well, but I'm going to jump over to something a tad different this time, so let's hope the views don't drop back down to single digits. Also, just a quick and huge thank you for 60 subscribers. I know it's not a lot in the grand scheme of things, but these small milestones really help me keep going and making this lackluster content for you guys. So, without further ado, let's get started on today's topic. One of the most alpha males in all of Warhammer Fantasy battles, Boris Todbringer, aka Toddy! Humans have it pretty rough in Warhammer, as unless you've been given the magical steroids from the Chaos Gods, you're never going to match the mystical might of an elf, the insane physical strength of an orc, or the brilliant beard of a dwarf. Still, humans have one thing in Warhammer that makes them interesting, and that is heart. They know that every day they wake up in a world where at any time they could be turned into the zombie slave of a vampire count, killed in a random orc or chaos raid, or stabbed on the toilet from the Skaven sewer empire. And yet instead of ending it all, like I would probably do, they keep going. Some keep going out of a want to make the world better, but others are driven by sheer spite and hatred. One of those latter men is Boris Todbringer, Elector Count of Middenheim, beloved of Ulrich, and the topic of today's video. Born to Bertolt Todbringer, Boris spent most of his early life growing up to be a fine statesman and warrior. Standing at just over 6 feet tall, Boris was known for a strong build in his early life. Though over time this did deteriorate slightly, he never dropped his appearance, mind you, keeping a thick beard and moustache to maintain an overwhelmingly Chad-like presence. His family lineage is tied to Magnus the Pious, an emperor who saved the empire and is still remembered fondly right up until the end times. Like his forefathers, Boris was groomed from a young age to be the next great Count of Middenheim, and though this was more than enough to signify his status, Boris also got the chance fairly early in life to become not only the ruler of his province, but the empire as a whole. It could even be said that Boris would have made a decent emperor when the father of Karl Franz died, but despite the Church of Ulrich backing him, Todbringer lost the election, and the title went to Karl, leaving our poor pal Boris to walk home with his tail between his legs back to Middenheim. Boris couldn't be down about his loss for too long, as trouble was stirring back home. You see, Middenheim isn't exactly the worst place to live in the Empire, as its warriors are tough, being blessed by the human god Ulrich, and it's not like Nordland and Averheim, which are directly next to the Horrorlands that are the Chaos Wastes in Sylvania. But, in the Drakwald, the massive forest that sits next to Middenheim, there is plenty of space for wood elves, goblins, and beastmen to roam, with the final creatures there being a most significant pain for Boris. Namely, one beastman in particular created a rivalry that surpasses most in Warhammer lore, and that beastman was known as Khazrak One-Eye. Before we get into the rivalry between the manliest man and the goatiest goat, we need to lay just a bit more background work around Boris and his family. Back in his youth, Boris got married to a woman named Maria von Richthofen. Now, I know what you're thinking. Happiness and marriage? That doesn't sound like our Chad Boris. Well, don't worry my friend. Maria passed while giving birth to their son Stefan, who Boris immediately named the heir to his throne. Months before, Boris learned he was the father to another son because he was just such a player. I mean, look at this guy. Who wouldn't fall for him? This older son was called Heinrich, but Boris couldn't name Heinrich his heir as he was born out of wedlock. While making Stefan his heir was the most logical move, this is something Boris would increasingly regret over time. Stefan didn't turn out to be a great lad as he grew up, and was actually prone to volatile bursts of anger and mania. There was a doctor from Tilia who could calm the boy down, but he was never going to live up to the example set by his father. Heinrich, on the other hand, was a strong and fine chap, and would have made for a great Elector Count one day were it not for the fact that he could never be named heir. Despite Heinrich being this fine young chap, and someone who would have made a great Elector Count one day, he would never be named heir due to the fact that Stefan already had been, and the aforementioned fact of Heinrich being born out of wedlock. Given the situation with his sons, and their eventual death, Boris fell into somewhat of a depression. His muscle turned to fat, and there were whisperings at court that he'd finally lost it. After his second wife died, things only worsened for Boris, as he succumbed to enfeeblement, ramblings, and the inability to even concentrate. The people at court all but lost faith in their leader, but the general populace had no idea this was going on, and still believed Boris could defy the emperor, which he actually had done on multiple occasions thanks to his strained relationship with Altdorf. Then, just when Boris was at his lowest, in came Kazarak, a rival that brought him back to his old self, at least from an outsider's perspective. For every raid the beastmen made on a nearby village, Boris would personally lead his men against the forces of Khazrak. in heated battles that each left the losing side steaming for revenge. Khazrak didn't necessarily pull Boris out of his depression, as this is accredited to an attempt on his life by a doppelganger. Doesn't that sound like a great soap opera? However, even though the Goat Man might not have been the catalyst for Boris getting back into action, he gave Toddy enough consistent fighting to make sure he didn't slip back down into that depression. Boris's purge of the Drakwald, which he led personally, involved crunching through hundreds if not thousands of beastmen with his Runefang leg biter, but still the goat, bull and horse people had enough numbers to keep coming back. These battles were constant, with each side gaining the upper hand at one point or another. One year at the Battle of Elsterwald, Boris finally pinned Khazrak down and took his eye, giving him the name Khazrak One Eye. Then, the next year, Khazrak dealt out some poetic justice, as he took Boris's eye too. As Boris already had a surname though, he didn't become Boris One Eye. Boris and Khazrak's rivalry continued for 8 years following the losses of their eyes, even leading all the way up to the end times. Over the years, Boris became increasingly convinced that Khazrak was the source of all the world's problems. He was sort of the Kanye West of his time, except unlike Mr. West, it's actually possible to like Boris Todbringer. In the end times, Boris takes this belief to new levels, as while everyone else thought that the guy who had all 4 of the Chaos Gods behind him is looking like the one to end the world, our pal Toddy thinks that if he kills Khazrak, he can stop the apocalypse. I mean, he's completely wrong, but at least his heart is in the right place. He was actually trying to stop the end of the world in the end times, while plenty of other characters were just accepting that nothing could be done and they were trying to secure more power for themselves. You know, Nagash, Manfred, take your pick. Boris didn't allow this belief that Khazrak had made all the wrongs to completely ruin his city or his province though, and he didn't ignore the threats when they came to his door. When Archaon first laid siege to Middenheim, Boris actually managed to run him off, something that is doubly impressive when you consider that the Incarnates weren't even around then, and the Incarnates were essentially the incarnations of the magical winds brought into the end times. Yeah, it wasn't great, but they weren't around, so Boris just had the might of mortal men to stop the champion of the Chaos Gods knocking at his door. However, when Archaon came around a second time, things were much more dire, and Boris was just an old man in a world where the big players were either the super powerful mages, servants of gods, or just gods themselves. So, he left Middenheim in the charge of Voltan, the young man that everyone thought was Sigmar reborn, and set out into the Drakwald, in the hopes of doing all that he could. A lot of people see Boris setting out to kill Khazrak when his city is under siege as a stupid move, but to be honest, I can't blame him. At this point, Altdorf's gone, and so are most of the places that have servants of order within them. He's just a guy against the horrors of Chaos Gods, and he's not even 100% mentally, so in reality, what more could he have done in this situation? In an event full of bad writing, this small part of the end times makes as much sense as it can, but yes, Boris does venture deep into Beastmen territory to track and kill Khazrak. He is discovered by the One-Eye's men, but rather than just killing him on the spot, Khazrak begins a one-on-one duel with Boris, which leads to Toddy standing tall over his longtime rival. His victory is short-lived though, as our main man Boris is then ripped apart by Khazrak's men. So, that's the story of Boris, and while he might not be the most eccentric or powerful character in Warhammer, he is a meme of an individual with a surprisingly deep character. He earns the title of Manliest Man for me because he just mans up to absolutely everything. He is the epitome of what a normal bloke can be in a world where there are beings that can just make you explode by looking at you. But yeah, that's our man Toddy. I'll hit you guys with another one of these character pieces soon, and I'll probably stick with fantasy for now, but let me know if you want me to delve into the other settings of Warhammer. I'm mostly going off what works, as I'm just trying to get this channel some traction at the minute. But anyway, thank you for watching, see you soon, love ya.